Okay, super. Well, welcome everybody to this webinar. I'm Catherine Stothart. I'm Director of Events for BAPT, the British Association of Psychological Type, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our first webinar of this sort of series. The last webinar was back in May, and this is the first of the sort of autumn and winter series. Our next webinar is with Josh Leach, who will be talking about social media for type practitioners. That's on the 30th of November. And I, for one, will definitely be, well, I'll be hosting it anyway, but if I wasn't hosting it, I would be there because it's an area that we've probably all got a lot to learn about. So that's our next webinar. If you're on our e-news distribution list, you'll be informed about our conference, and we're planning, as well as a virtual conference next year in April, we're planning an in-person 2-day event in London. So hoping to see some of you there as well. Anyway, without more ado, I want to introduce Susan Nash. I'm really pleased to have Susan here today. Many years ago, I attended a workshop she ran similar to this one on dating, mating, and relating. And I can vouch personally for how much it helped me in my relationship with my husband. We've now been married for 40 years, so it worked. So I was delighted. Susan's updated the content of the workshop, and I was really pleased when she accepted my invitation to run this updated workshop for BAPT. Susan, as most of you probably already know, is an international expert on type. She's written many books on type. She works with blue chip companies to introduce personality type, temperament, and interaction styles to them. And she runs her own type academy. And we're very lucky she's here today, because tomorrow she's going to be speaking at the Australian conference. So she's busy time for her at the moment. So Susan, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Good to meet you. Welcome to Dating, Mating and Relating. And we will be doing lots of discussion and interaction. So, the link for the book, for the handout, is in the material. So do make sure you have that, because that's a support tool. So who'd like to read this quote for me? And it's at the top of page 2 if you have a participant guide. Who'd like to read that quote for me?
I'll read it.
Thank you, Jerry.
Love is in us. It is deeply embedded in the brain. Our challenge is to understand each other.
Thank you very much, Jerry. And Helen Fisher has obviously written a lot of material on relationships. And I think, as Catherine said, you know, understanding each other is a really important part. I mean, how many of you have ever thought when you signed up for this, oh, I'd like to find the absolute best type to be with? Anybody think that? And you can put some, if you're in person, I can see your camera, raise your hands up or give me some sort of response. Anybody think that? Is there a best type for us to be with? Anyone thought that? I'm seeing from the cameras, I see shaking heads. Thank you, Nathan. No, there is not. Anybody can be with anybody. And the edited version is, as long as you value and understand the differences between you, and you're committed to what I would call a lifetime of hard work. And Catherine's got to 40 years, I'm at 47 years, but I've known my husband for 50 years. So, so what I'd love you to do now, please drop into chat. What did you want to achieve from attending this session, please? So drop in chat, what did you want to achieve from attending this session? That's why I like the cameras. I can see when people are typing. If anyone wants to verbally give an answer, you can also raise your hand electronically or physically and give it verbally. All right, lovely. I'm starting to see. So Tamsin, be able to talk about this more when I'm asked by others. Very nice. Thank you, Tamsin. Preferences for ESTJ. Lovely. Catherine, reminders. Daniel, getting new perspectives. Yes. Jerry, better understanding of the way my preferences interact with my wife's. Yes, it's a study. It really is when you look at this. being able to relate better with people who have never heard of type before. Thank you, Nathan. Help people who are dating. Sarita, thank you. Tell me about that, Sarita. You want to help people dating? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I've been, am I?
We can hear you.
Yeah, you can hear you. Yeah. I've been like coming up with training sessions, 7 sessions. So on I love you, 4 sessions on I, 2 sessions on you, and 2 sessions on love and 1 session on you. So I've been just coming up with that course. So I've been looking at your books, and coming from an Eastern background where we choose partners not by choice and we stick with them. So MBTI literally saved my marriage, and I want to take it to the dating population.
Thank you, Sarita. Yes, and it's an interesting, the success rate, I think, of those sort of more formalized marriage compared to those in-love relationships, actually, I think is higher, funny enough, so, which is another subject completely. Just to hear your update, thank you, Gina, since I heard this workshop before and had the book. Thank you. A deeper understanding of how different personalities types interact in relationships. Excellent. All right. And let me see if I want to ask another follow-up question. No, I think that's good. So thank you. So the good news is you're in the right session. And we, many of you probably know, there are multiple ways of coming at this sort of 4-letter personality type. One is through the more traditional preferences, so EI, SN, TF, and JP. There's also the cognitive processes, which I know there's a lot, which is extroverted sensing, introverted sensing, etc. There's also interaction style, which is how you naturally engage with others. But for this session, I'm going to particularly focus on temperaments in interactions and in dating, mating, and relating. And I'll tell you more later. But one of the benefits is it is simpler and more meaningful, I think, for people who are in relationships to gravitate towards and understand. So you'll get lots of tips, and they will be around relationships and temperament. So the agenda, which is on page 2, we're going to look briefly at the 3 stages in relationships. Has anybody heard Helen Fisher's 3 stages in relationships? Anybody know what that? No? No? All right, then we're going to look at temperament, and I'm going to use David Kierce's words of love mates. And I know there are different words for temperament, so if at any time I use a term for temperament that you don't understand, please ask, because I prefer not to use the letters or the preferences when it comes to temperament, because temperament is a different theory to type. And when you call the temperaments by their 2 preferences, you're sort of inferring that it's the same theory, and it's not. And then we're going to look at how you improve relationships. There will be activities. For those of you who don't have cameras on, can you just give me a thumbs up if you're willing to join into breakout rooms? Because we need to know that. Can you just give me an electronic thumbs up if you're willing to join in breakout rooms? Okay, super. And when you're in breakout rooms, if it's at all possible to put your cameras on, it might be easier in the breakout rooms. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So 3 stages in relationships are, Ellen called that sort of dating, and I know this is oversimplistic, and it worked really nicely with the title Dating, Mating, and Relating. She talked about that first 6 months when you've got all those hormones going, and there's almost like there's nothing else you can think about apart from the partner that you're with at the time. Then she talks about limerence, and this is what we commonly associate, I think, with sort of being in love. You know, it's the foundation of the relationship. It's not quite as hormonal or driven. I mean, you're back into your thinking brain a little bit more, and the other person is significant to you. And this tends to last from 6 months to 4 years. And I think we often see that divorces happen or separations happen at that 4 to 7+ years. because that's when we get into what we call the relating, and the energy changes. And that's when normally both partners have to be really committed. And that's when you start to really create the framework for what your long-term relationship is going to be like. How are you going to communicate? What does spending time together look like? Or what does spending time separately look like? What's your approach to finances? How will you approach conflicts between the two of you? And the reason they're categorized this way is that's how the chapters work out in dating, mating, and relating. And and that transition from that in love to love is often what we don't spend any time looking at. I mean, when you think about it, how much money do people spend on weddings now? If you are just getting married, drop some figures into chat. How much do you think a wedding costs us? Drop your thoughts into chat for me. Oh, look, we've got 20,000, 20,000, an arm and a leg. I like that. It might be just one arm at the moment, David. Yes, so we've got it too much. Thank you. And then I want to think about how much money do you invest in the relationship? What's your thoughts there? Any thoughts on how much money we would invest in the relationship by comparison? And if you want to add something verbally, feel free to add something verbally. Often zero. That's right, Jerry. I mean, I'm delighted, Saritha, you're helping people in the dating part, because that will help in the relationship part. And often we only invest in our relationship when it's in trouble. And that may be a little bit too late. If we could invest in our relationship when it's new and fresh and really build an understanding of each other, then we've got a foundation on which to work. And I think Temperament is a fantastic framework to help in this growth journey. So let me pause for a moment. I'm going to be doing this regularly. What questions or thoughts do you have on what I've just shared with you? Thoughts, questions, or comments? I'd love something more verbal if anyone is comfortable verbalizing.
Actually, Susan, I'm quite interested to know, with your last question, how much money do you invest in the relationship? I was thinking, oh, I wonder what sort of things you were thinking. You know, do you mean things like paying money to go out for meals together? You know, that type of thing, or, you know, what you spend on holidays or your home, or were you thinking relationship counseling? What sort of things?
Thank you for the question. I think I would see it as two main areas. One is, do you consciously explore what both of you like to do and enjoy doing together and invest time in those areas? So if you like to eat meals out, do it. You know, my husband and I happen to like doing cruises, and we like to walk. Well, I think Derek just about likes to walk together with me, but he does now. Those things are important to us. Some things are not important to us, and we wouldn't both enjoy it. So we both have to enjoy it. And I think workshops, relationship counseling, anything that helps you to understand and celebrate who your partner is and how and why they're different to you and how and why that's a benefit is useful. Counseling may be part of that. And I mean, there's not enough good workshops out there about relationships looking through the type lenses, I think. Thank you for that, Catherine. Any other thoughts, questions, or comments? So, and that information, by the way, is in your participant guide. So if you don't need to frantically write notes. So now let's look at temperament. And here is, we'd like to hold a poll. And again, this is on, if you've got the participant guide, it's on page 3. So I'd like to ask you, how familiar are you with temperament? So use it frequently, sometimes rarely. know it as only 2 preference combinations? How many of you know your own temperament? And if you're comfortable sharing, drop that in chat. And how many of you know your partner's temperament? And if you know that, feel free to drop that in chat. So Catherine has launched the poll. You should be able to give me a quick thumbs up if you can see the poll okay. Perfect. Catherine, if you want to keep a check on that for me and let me know. And you can slide the little grey thing up and down so you can see all the questions.
Yeah, so 10 people have answered at the moment, possibly a few more to answer.
Let's
And
just
11
give it
have answered. I haven't answered actually. But I'm not sure I can, so I won't.
I don't think, I'm not sure if you can. I haven't either, and I'm not sure that I can, so I don't.
Okay, well, there we go. Well, 11 people have answered, so I think we'll go with that. So I'll end the poll, and then we should see the results coming up on the screen any minute now, I hope.
I wonder if I have to. Shall I stop sharing? Let me stop sharing my screen.
Okay. Jerry's given me a thumbs up, so I'm guessing he can see the poll results. Good.
Perfect. So how familiar are you? 27% use temperament frequently, 36% use temperament sometimes, 9% use temperament rarely, and actually 27% know temperament as only the 2 preference combinations. Excellent. So let me just capture that then. 27, 36, 9, 27. Great. How many of you know your temperament? The majority do. That's 73%. And how many of you know your partner's temperament? Again, 64%. So wonderful. Thank you for that. So that'll help me. Thank you very much, Catherine. So let me go back to my screen. Here we go. So for some of you, everybody seeing the screen again? Yep, perfect. For some of you, this might be review. For some of you, about half of you, this could be quite new content. So the 4 temperaments, a little bit of background on the 4 temperaments. Firstly, there are 4, obviously, and there are 25 centuries of cross-cultural recognition. And David Keirsey was the original person who was studying temperament, and he also came across the work that Myers and Briggs were doing in terms of Jung's cognitive functions. And so he was the first person that integrated the 2 theories. But the patterns of temperament have been familiar for 25 centuries. Now, and it was interesting, David, I believe temperament to be inborn and constant. David, are you comfortable sharing the question that you got asked this week? And I know it was about preferences, but about the pandemic.
Yes, a colleague who works with children in school said she'd noticed that more children were expressing preferences for N and P than in the past when she had worked with children in school in previous years, and wondered whether it might be that people's personalities can change due to a pandemic or something else of that magnitude.
And what did we decide at the beginning? I think the 3 of us were having this. Catherine, you and I would have it.
Yeah, we thought, no, they don't. It's it's our skills and behavioural flexibility that change, not our underlying preferences.
Thank you. And that's my observation, that the temperament remains constant. We see different behaviours based on the different stages in life we're at, and certainly the pandemic would bring out different skills and behaviours. And it does drive behaviour, it doesn't limit it. So it affects our growth and development. So often it will affect the things that we find really interesting and the things that we find really stressful. And it's a pattern, not a definition. Who'd like to tell me what the difference is between a pattern and a definition? And if you don't want to come off chat, don't come off mute, but feel free to put your ideas in chat. What's the difference between a pattern and a definition? And I think this is also a really useful concept with cognitive processes as well. What's the difference between a pattern and a definition? Pattern sounds more flexible while definition sounds fixed. Thank you, Catherine. I see Jerry typing, so I'm going to wait just for a second. Pattern is stable, but allows for changes and flux. Definition is fixed. Exactly right, Jerry. The analogy I use is if you think of an oak tree, it always comes from an acorn. An oak tree has roots, trunk, branches, twigs, leaves. That's the pattern. That's fixed. What is flexible is what do the leaves look like? What do the branches look like? What does the trunk look like? That's flexible. And that's the advantage of using patterns rather than definitions, is they are more flexible to human behavior. And finally, it's dynamic, not static. I mean, we will demonstrate different behaviors at different times in our lives. That doesn't mean our temperament has changed. It just means our skills and behaviors are being modified or adapted to the context. So, and it's influencing, not limiting. Just because people say to me, well, what's the best type to be a coach, or what's the best type to be a facilitator? Anyone can do any job as long as it meets some of their core needs and they're motivated by it and it's not too stressful. So, Four Temperaments. The Keirsey names were artisan, guardian, rational, and idealist. The Linda Berens names, which I use a lot right now, are improviser, stabilizer, theorist, and catalyst. But Keirsey's words were playmate, helpmate, my mate, and soulmate. And I'll be using those because they sort of capture some of the behaviors that we might see. Yes, the oak tree definition is a nice one. I didn't like Linda at one point doing the whole tree thing, but the more I understand patterns, the more I like it. Any thoughts or comments on the names of these four temperaments, which are on page 3, sort of 2/3 of the way down through 3? So let me ask you this: how does temperament differ from type, do you think? My type, I'm talking about the 4-letter preference code. What does temperament give you that type may not be able to give you? Any thoughts? Happy to have a verbal answer. I'd love some more cameras. I really would. I know it's evening there. Thank you, Daniel. I'm extremely grateful for having some visibility and your friend behind you there. So, what do you think? What are the differences? Hang on, let's have a look in chats. Deeper motivation and drives. The words are good, actually, Catherine, because they do capture sort of the core of the temperament. Yes, so what temperament is, the unique thing about temperament is it captures our core needs and values. And often our core needs are initially unknown to self and unknown to others. If you use the 4 quadrants, unknown to self and unknown to others. So learning our temperament is really valuable to understanding why we do what we do and what energizes us and what things do we find really, really stressful. In your participant guide, this is included in your participant guide. So it's a pattern of needs, values, talents, and behaviors that underlies our way of acting and being in the world. What are the key words in that definition? And it's in the grey box on the bottom of page 3. What are the key words in that definition? Feel free to put your ideas in chat. it underlies, thank you, Viv, it's acting and being, it's sort of there all the time, but we may not be necessarily aware of it. I know many of you are familiar, but the magical book really on temperament and stress is Survival Games, Personalities Play. And that really looks at how might we behave when these core needs are not met. What happens to our behaviors as we try to protect our core values? And we each behave in a way that's actually counterproductive. And the work on temperament and stress is very, very rich. So I'd encourage you to read that as a resource. So at the bottom of page 3, I've captured the 4 temperaments needs. It looks like Sharon is just connecting. Welcome, Sharon. If you could put your camera on, it would be lovely to get participants, 5 participant cameras instead of just 4, but I live in hope here. So I have kept the preference combinations next to them just for now to help you in your learning. So Playmates, the key driver, the key needs for our improvisers is to be noticed. Love me, hate me, but please don't ignore me or bore me. I want it and I want it now. And in fact, one of my improvisers said, instant gratification takes too long. So they like to make an impact and they act swiftly and practically in the moment. And most improvisers or playmates will recognize if you share the needs, which one they most they gravitate towards. And they are approximately 40% of the population. Then for our guardians or helpmates, also called stabilizers, their core need is to be responsible, know what they're responsible for, live up to their responsibility and contribute to the group or team. And team membership is key, as well as contributing to a concrete goal or accomplishment. And they are also approximately 40% of the population. Helpmate, because they're there to support, and they support in concrete, tangible ways. Playmate, because life's fun and we're supposed to have fun, and they have the gift of getting the best out of the present moment. Then we have our rationals or our theorists who are mind mates. Core need is to be knowledgeable, competent, have autonomy and control. Very stressed actually when they might perceive themselves to have been incompetent, and really good with a relationship, but tend to value those who are competent. If you're not competent, I don't care how you're competent. It could be that you're a great artist or you're a great musician. They're very democratic about competence, but if you're not competent, it's harder to build the relationship. And hence my mates, so quite cerebral in their thought processes. Approximately 10% of the population. And the reason I don't use the Myers-Briggs statistics to imply these statistics is because our research shows that the MBTI can often be wrong on at least one of 4 preferences, probably 50% of the time, because if you only look through the preference lens, you see one thing. If you triangulate and look through temperament and preferences or temperament and interaction style, which is my preferred way of working, you see different things. Then as idealist or soulmate, also called the catalyst, core need is to have purpose and meaning, do things that make a difference, value empathetic relationships, are there for the always looking at the future to develop their own and others' potential. And every individual is unique and they value that in others. And also value unique identity sounds a bit like, oh, well, I'm such a special person. It's more understanding what makes me special and how I can use that strength as a gift in the work that I do. Playmates' gift is getting the best out of the present moment. Helpmates' gift, best of the past to the future. Mindmate's gift, invention. Catalyst or soulmate's gift is the gift of hope. What thoughts, questions, or comments do you have when you look at those 4 core needs? Thoughts, questions, or comments? Because people learn best when they engage. If you just sit and listen, actually, you're not going to remember. I'm sorry, my other field of study at the moment is facilitation and how adults learn. And the more active we are, the more we'll learn. I know theorists actually probably the best of all of my mates are best at absorbing and learning in their own time. Other temperaments do need to engage to learn. And I'd hate this just to be a one-way session where you listen and you only remember less than 2% afterwards.
So I was
Thank
just
you.
going to say something, Susan, actually, although really I shouldn't because I'm the host, but I love this stuff. So all I was going to comment on was, you know, when I first did your workshop, however many years ago it was, what I learned about my husband, who's ISTJ, so guardian stabilizer, was that need that he has to be responsible, that need to take responsibility and perhaps take responsibility for more than he should. And also that sense of duty to his group, to his community. And I don't think I'd ever appreciated that about him before. I'm NT preference, Mindmate, you know, all intellectual stuff, like to have debate and discussion. I'd never really appreciate what his core gift is, his gift to me, you know, and to our family and to, you know, the wider world. So yeah, so I don't know if that's quite answers your question, but that's what I really learned to appreciate in my own relationship.
And sort of snap me as the big picture. I love the concepts, lots the idea, all that practical stuff. Who needs to bother with that? Well, actually, it's really important. My husband is a stabilizer, is ISFJ. All that stuff is really important to ground. So he gives reality and I give potential. Perfect match. Perfect match.
I think Susan, I over the last 12 months helped my nephew move away from a broken relationship. It broke really, probably the foundations weren't there, but it broke through COVID and the pandemic. Both were housed together, and has guardian preferences, and his partner was artisan, and she was absolutely stir crazy. And as lockdown opened up, she went absolutely crazy, going out. You know, they've got 2 children, one severely autistic, so a really tough relationship. And I used temperament theory and stress theory to help my nephew make sense of what was actually playing out, and that she was describing him as boring and not the person that she'd met, and he was just trying to keep the house clean, look after their 2 sons, and keep things together. And to her, that just appeared that he was just totally dull and boring, and he couldn't understand that he was doing what he needed to do from his core needs to keep the family together, to hold things together, to hold things, you know, tight, and help his children when his relationship was falling apart and she was just going out, and as you know, so helping understand, make meaning of what is playing out was incredibly valuable in that relationship. And it didn't recover. It was beyond recovery, I think.
Right.
But what it did was help him move away from that relationship and restore his own understanding of what actually had happened, rather than thinking that he had failed some way in his responsibility.
It's very interesting. I mean, as you know, often our artisans or our playmates often marry helpmates, because obviously they're large percentage of the population, and in that sort of dating and mating stage, they sort of love each other. You know, our playmates like, oh, that's so cool, you do all the things that you're supposed to do, that's great. And then the helpmate says to the playmate, oh, it's so great, we have fun in the moment and we do all the, you get me out of my responsibility and allow me to play. And then after about 4 years or so, or drastic changes like the pandemic, The helpmate is like, why don't you do what you say you're going to do? And the playmate is like, why don't you just loosen up and have fun? Because they're not valuing what each of them bring to the relationship. So thank you for that, Viv. Bit annoyed that prediction of soulmate is so true. Thank you, David. And interesting to consider whether you can have a temperament that differs from your preferences. Jerry, my observation over how many years of doing this, 30 years? No. There might be some really strong contextual stuff that causes you to assess differently, or you've developed different skills because of trauma, life events, experience, education. But when you really dig down and really get comfortable and really aligned, they are aligned. I've never had a someone that there was one person who had preferences for ISTP. I see those are your preferences. That's the type that I find most often assesses incorrectly on the MBTI. And it took me 3 two-day sessions. And finally she went, okay, now I see. I use Chart the Course to plan things out. I'm highly analytical, so dominant introverted thinking, and yet I'm still an improviser or a playmate that likes to make an impact. And my mapping stuff out is at war almost with my playing in the moment. So it was really, so I do find, as I say, it took 3 two-day programs, but finally she went, yes, I've got it. And it's like, okay, cool. Because she was able to align. Excellent, thank you for that. So we're going to do a brief temperament activity. Now let's see if we can do this. I'm going to try and share a document in chat, and I'd like you just to pop in here, and everybody should be able to edit. And all you have to do is go to this, you just go to, if you look at the bottom, you just go to a different tab that you open up. Have a look and see if that opens. Just put some of the 4 quadrants, anything that you associate with each of those temperaments based on whether you're in a relationship with them, or like Viv, you know somebody else in that relationship. Let me just give you a couple of minutes. Can everybody access the document? Okay.
Yes. And
we should all be able to type in at the time. That's the advantage of Google Docs, that everyone can enter data at the same time. Here we are, good. Oh, look, positive, please, positive. I like fun, let's watch the flighty. Care, being there for the other person, reliable, my mate ideas, soulmate commitment, time to understand people. Where I'm going. Thank you, you deleted the one there we go. All right, intellectualizing, debate and discussion, often intelligent, or maybe they think they're intelligent. All temperaments can be intelligent. Soulmate commitment, depth of meaning, take time to understand people, empathy and real listening to understand. There's our playmate, fun in the moment, easygoing, happy to live in the moment, relaxed. We need a few more of those positives for our helpmates, I think. I know we've got at least one ESTJ and one ISFJ. So let's make sure we get the ideas there. And if you keep that document open, we can refer to it. I don't have the ability to share because we're not in Google Meet. So you can keep that open as a separate tab, I believe. All right, so fun in the moment, action, calm, easygoing, relax. So that's our playmate, helpmate, care, responsible, helping to contribute around the home, all those practical things that other temperaments may not value, will not let you down, practical, yes, 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 kind, use the past to understand the present. I love the word grounded. I really do. Thank you for that. Being reliable, completes what they say they will, always there for you. Really nice. This correlates to another theory called true colors, and playmate is often orange. They call the resourceful orange. Helpmate they're often yellow, but they don't show up very well. So what I do is I call them brown, and the brown because they're grounded. My mate is green, so they call it curious green. And soulmate is blue, so they say authentic blue. So just another few seconds to complete that. And what I can do is I can see Jessie has to share off another meeting, catch up afterwards. Thank you, Jessie. You'll have access to this document afterwards. I'll probably stop the sharing in about 24 hours or so. So if you want to download it, great content on that. What's your learning point from completing that shared document? Looking at some of the attributes of each of those temperaments. What's your key learning point?
Very different core strengths.
Very different core strengths. They really are. And, you know, if you're one of the temperaments that really values ideas and theories, which could be the mind mate or the soulmate, and you're with a partner who's either in the moment as a playmate with extroverted sensing or a stabilizer, introverted sensing, it could be very easy, a helpmate, it could be very easy to think, oh, you know, so he does all that stuff for me, so what? And really understanding and valuing. I mean, I had a personal experience. I mean, I knew about this anyway, but let me tell you, when I broke both of my arms last year, I was very glad I was married to a helpmate, because Derek had to do everything for me. I mean, everything, and I don't know its details, but minimally feed me, give me straws to drink coffee. So, and for him, that was really rewarding. If I'd had to do that for him, I probably would have found it very stressful, because it's so practical, it would be outside my core competencies. I could do it, but it wouldn't meet some of those core needs. Excellent. So let me just see, there's one more thing in chat. Let's have a look. You can really see the contrasts and the differences, Jerry. Thank you. So this is in your participant guide. I just captured a few key essence. So this is on page 5 in your participant guide. We're going to be using this content for an activity pretty soon, so I'm not going to read it to you because you're quite capable of reading. You can see the core needs, though, being met by the everyday is adventure, lots of options in the moment, valuing that fun and enjoyment. And the time focus is quite key here. Actually, I keep trying to admit Valerie, but she doesn't come in. So, because if you're present focused as the playmates are, then it's very different if you're thinking, well, what's your plan and where are you on your process? Yeah, Valerie, you're probably going to have to mute because we're getting all the background noise. Sorry, because I know we're not going to be able to hear you. Thank you. And to those who like to plan ahead, it can feel quite restrictive, and it could feel like they're taking away the freedom and their independence. Any thoughts or comments on our playmate? No? As I say, this is all on page 5, so you'll have this for afterwards. And then I love the word honor that goes with helpmate, because there is a deep respect, I think, from our helpmates. You talked about the sense of duty, loyalty, responsibility, practical, like a sense of stability, like a sense of closure, tend to value what happened in the past, and that sort of step-by-step approaches. Dry sense of humor. I do see there's a sense of humor, and it's a tendency, it's not a complete refined, but dry sense of humor, I often pick that out from our stabilizers. So don't worry, Sharon, I'd rather you drive your car safely than participate more in the webinar. Thank you. So thank you for sending the note. Any thoughts? Who here has a helpmate or guardian or stabilizer in their lives and would be willing to share an example or a story?
I have a helpmate in my life, and so I'm here on this webinar as an idealist following my life pursuit of learning more. And right now my helpmate is making dinner.
Yeah, I like that. Again, concrete, tangible things. And yeah, so my helpmate also does all the cooking. I do the clearing up. So we do share things because I can think about other things while I'm clearing up. And same here, Viv. Yeah, so got a few helpmates in the background there. And then for my mates that passionate about talking about interesting activities, our son happens to be my mate, and he constantly wants to debate. Even as a child, he wanted to debate. And I said to him one time, Anthony, can we just have dinner without a debate? Because I personally find debating quite stressful over dinner. And he said, I want to debate what it is about debating that you don't like over dinner. So there's and that passion for intellectual, lots of thought-provoking questions, really interesting thought-provoking questions, more cerebral humor. I love Steve Martin. I think he's super, my mate. His humor is always very abstract and play on words. And they do expect a degree of autonomy in relationships, not demanding it, but comfortable with it. You know, there's two temperaments that are more collaborative or relationship focused. They tend to be the helpmates and the soulmates. There are two temperaments that are more independent or pragmatic, and they are playmates and my mates. And they both are much more comfortable with independence for each of their, you know, much be like, oh, well, I'm absolutely happy if you do this and I do this. And, you know, we've just, we have our son-in-law's brother and his partner. We've got an improviser who's a playmate and a mime mate. And she just went to do the walk in Spain for 3 weeks. I forget the name of it, but there's multiple ways of doing it. And left her mime mate husband for 3 weeks with their 2 young children, with his mother visiting. So she didn't, and that they were both happy with that. Absolutely happy with that, because he's going to do his trip. And they're both happy with independent time, whereas you may find, and all of these words I try and use conditional language, you may find tend to, because no science is absolute. This is not science, this is emotional people. Whereas our helpmates and our soulmates might prefer to do things together and feel a little uncomfortable doing things separately because of the collaborative nature of the temperament. And then finally, a soulmate who probably could go into a relationship with dreams of perfect reality. So that could be a challenge. Fantasy-filled romance, successive relationships, probably because very relationship focused. Self-deprecating humor. I thought Bridget Jones was actually in Bridget Jones' Diary was a lovely example. I think she was probably a soulmate with Colin Firth as a mind mate, and our lovely there was the playmate. Who's the other star in that? Absolute playmate. Hugh Grant. Hugh Grant played the playmate. It's a lovely study in temperament, actually. And may be focused too much on the ideal versus the realities of life. Realities of life might end up feeling quite disappointing, really. So it means, oh, we've got to do all this practical stuff to be together. Oh gosh, can't we just go ahead and dream? So I'm constantly on that search for self. So where's my purpose? What's my purpose? I found a purpose, let's find another purpose. So that constant search for self. So any thoughts or observations on these 4 definitions? Daniel, I was seeing you laughing there. Anything that you'd be comfortable sharing about what was amusing you about that?
It's hard to think that any relationships with such diversity in the core need can be successful. So it makes me curious as to, you know, so is the success a soulmate and a soulmate and a helpmate and a helpmate. How do the different temperaments actually successfully blend without the knowledge of temperament?
How they blend without the knowledge of temperament, I think pure luck or not. With the knowledge of temperament, we can be much more self-aware and aware and intentional about it. That's actually going to be one of the activities that we do in a moment. I'd like to do this activity, but I'm wondering would this be a good time to take just a short break, Catherine, of 5 minutes, or do we do this activity and then take a break? What's your thought? Because we did start 5 minutes late.
Hard to decide. Why not? Yeah, shall we have a 5-minute break? A quick 5-minute break. So that literally does mean 5 minutes.
5 minutes. So
I will
it's 50,
stop the recording. Yeah.
Perfect. 57 minutes past the hour. So it's 2 minutes past the hour. We would like, perfect. So we're going to do another activity just to dive down a little bit more deeply into temperament again. And what we're going to do is a thing called a Jamboard. In a moment, I'm going to give you a link to a Jamboard. And normally if I'm in person, people use cards, but virtually a Jamboard works very well. The Jamboards are numbered, so there's going to be 3 teams. So do they see their team number? So who's in the first team, Catherine?
Okay, so I think you will. You'll know because you go to room 1. So team 1 is room 1, basically, but it's Daniel and Ingrid.
Just one name in there. All right, just one name and one name into 2, just so that I know. So if you're in a room with Daniel, you're going to go to Jamboard 1. That's right. So room 2 has Jerry in it. Jerry, so if you see Jerry in room 2, you go to Jamboard 2, and he's just there at the top of the screen. And 3, thank you, Catherine. Has David Hodgson in it. If you're with David Hodgson, you're on Jamboard number 3. So go to the Jamboard that relates your number. They have 5 categories, and they're actually in the participant guide: approach, talent, time orientation, language, and stress response. For each category, there are 4 statements. So for approach, there are 4 different approach Post-it notes you'll see. And what you need to do is you need to match the statement in each category with the correct temperament. So it's like a card activity. So for instance, if it said time orientation, one of the cards is present time, there's past time, infinite time, and future time. So you would just say which relates to which temperament. And we've already talked about our playmates are in the present time orientation. So that gives you 1. And you have 8 minutes for this activity. Any questions on this activity? All right, let me find my Jamboard. So see, again, if you're in team 1, Jamboard 1, team 2, Jamboard 2, team 3, Jamboard 3. Sorry, just finding my chats. Here we go. Hang on, let's go to all. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you can get to that Jamboard, okay? And you just can move the Post-it notes around. It's like cards, you just move them around. Getting good thumbs up, thank you. I also am able to see what's happening on the Jamboard. If you've got any questions, then raise your hand because we can see that when you're in breakout rooms. So Catherine is going to send you to a breakout room, either 1, 2, or 3, so you could discuss, and I would advise you to talk with each other as you're moving the Post-it notes. So over to you, Catherine.
Susan, can I just say all the Jamboards as I've gone to are all labeled breakout room 1?
Yeah, they are. Yes, so just go to at the top. If you go to the top, there's a little square that says 1 of 6.
Okay, so go to 2
So
of
just
6.
go to 2 of 6 or 3 of 6, please. Yeah, sorry. Otherwise, I had to redo every Jamboard. Thank you for that question. I'd have to manually do them. So
Okay, brilliant. And I can see some people are already, I think, moving things around. So that's great. But anyway, I shall now open all the rooms and look forward to seeing you back here in 8 minutes.
Perfect.
So you should get a request to join a room and just accept it and go off to your room. And I shall just set my timer for 8 minutes.
Perfect.
I can see some people are going.
Yeah, we've got 2 in room 1, 2, 3 in room 2, 2 in room 3. David Hodgson hasn't joined. Maybe he, oh, can he not if he's on his phone? So Emma and Nathan are in.
They're in room 3.
3, yes, here we go. And Mead's in room 3. Okay, there we go.
Oh, I'll stop recording, by the way.
Back. So thank you, Catherine. Welcome back. I'd like to ask you first, how was that activity working with the Jamboard? I'd love some ideas on what I call the group process. How was it to work with the Jamboard online? And either in chat or verbally. Susan, thank you for putting your camera on. It's good to see you person to person.
I thought it was a really good group process, and I think it actually replicated the card sort really well. So for our group, we had some good discussion, a little bit of connectivity issues getting to the Jamboard, but aside from that, yeah, good.
Yeah, so good way. And Tamsin said used it before and like it. It's fine as long as you can see it. Okay, yes, it's. I mean, I've got so used now to my double screens and separate that it can be hard to access, particularly if you're on an iPad or if you've only got one screen. You have to be careful about your tabs. And you like it as well, Valerie. Thank you for that. All right, so that's the group process. Anything that emulates and causes physical and social engagement is important when we're teaching type, I think, and that's the subject I'm going to be covering tomorrow for OSAPT, actually, how to use virtual in-person blended learning. So here's the answers. Looking, and I was able to see your Jamboard. The one element that seemed to be more tricky was the stress response, and that will be understandable because we didn't specifically cover that. And let me just describe those stress responses. So our playmates, if they're feeling confined and they feel like their freedom is being taken away and they're not able to make an impact, it causes them to want to push out. And that's what we mean by escalate and retaliate. I'm going to take you and I'm going to raise you one. And you'll never win the escalate game with our playmates or our improvisers. Or the way around it is to say, how can I restore the freedom to make their own choices and the ability to make an impact in the moment? Then the behavior stops, because this is not a conscious game. This is an unconscious game to protect self-esteem. And I'm going to refer back to what Catherine said for our stabilizers or our helpmates. When they take on responsibilities, their biggest challenge is they can take on too many responsibilities. They're constantly looking at, oh dear, that's responsibility. No one's done it. I better pick that up and do it. So they become overloaded. And that's when blame and complaint comes out, which is, look at what you made me do. I'm overloaded. I'm tired. And often you see the physical symptoms of sick, worried, tired, and depressed. You don't want to treat symptoms, go for the cause, which is how can you restore and reallocate responsibilities? How can you get them to be part of a team? How can you help them see they're contributing? Do not take their responsibilities away. Oh, you're overloaded. I'm going to take it from you. Don't do that. That makes the problem worse. The discussion is, you're overloaded. What can I help you with? How can you reprioritize? How might you look at your workload differently? With my mate, if they perceive themselves to have not been competent, to have lost autonomy and control, then all their strengths of being cerebral go into their brain and they become preoccupied and often paralyzed. I mean, even her original book called it the robot game, because if I'm either preoccupied and I'm going to critical question lots and lots and lots and lots to distract it from me being incompetent, or they're sort of almost mentally paralyzed this is, if I'd only said or done this, I would have been more masterful. Way to overcome that, how can they become competent? How can they get autonomy and control back? And finally, for our catalyst or our soulmate, if they perceive themselves to have been betrayed, if they don't have a purpose, what they're doing is having no meaning, they're not able to develop theirs and others' potential, if they're doing lots of work that's really detailed and nitpicky, what they do is they sort of mentally, and it's an emotional disconnection. And then they move from being authentic to inauthentic. And then they may make global overgeneralizations, which I'm seeing Daniel laugh here, and I'm thinking that the my mate, soulmate, you know, everybody hates me, I think I'll eat some worms. And the my mate would say, no, only one person disliked what you just did. Don't overgeneralize. And then the soulmate will think, you don't understand me, you're against me too. So anyway, so it's just really interesting to watch. So again, for our soulmate, how can they reconnect with purpose? How can they get meaning into what they're doing? How can they, if when relationships let them down, what other relationships are there that they can strengthen? What can they do to, even if it's not able to develop potential in their work, are there other areas in which they can develop their potential? So any further thoughts or comments about this? The purpose of this activity is to really understand some of those key attributes for our next activity. What's your learning point walking away from this activity? I've shared the purpose, but what's your learning point from this activity, do you think? I'm seeing Jerry typing again. Who'd like to share a learning point from this activity? How coherent it all is. It is.
Mine is, no matter how much I think I know this, every time I revisit it, I learn something, because you're driven by your own type, your own preferences. And so intellectually knowing something and revisiting it is an amazing reminder how diverse we are and how different we act.
It really is. And, you know, the reason that people would say, well, how come you've been able to work in this subject material for 30 years? Don't you ever get bored? And it's like,
No.
what is there to get bored about? Every individual I meet gives me some insight and an understanding that I didn't have before, because we're such complex emotional systems that when we can look through these lenses, we can get such insight into our own behavior and understanding how and why others might behave in a certain way. And, you know, when we go into our emotional brain, we stop, our logic gets blocked. But this helps us to come back into our thinking brains, to take away some of those judgments and to be able to use a lovely neocortex to actually think, what was happening here and how could I have acted differently and what can I do in this situation? So, thank you for that. Thank you, Viv and Jerry. Any other thoughts before a quick review and then we do one final activity? Personally love the Jamboards. Anyway, so this is in your materials as well, but it's towards the end, but just a few ideas. And we use the paint palette for our Playmate or our artisan or improviser. Why would we use a paint palette to capture the essence of what our Playmate is like in long-term relationships, do you think? What is it about a paint palette that captures the essence of our Playmates in long-term? Colourful. Thank you, Valerie. It's nice and quiet there, so you must have found this quite a place on the train. Yeah, it is colourful. Hands-on, in the moment. Every artist's creation is unique and different. It's a very tactile, in the moment skill, and that captures their tactical talent, which is just being hands-on in the present moment. So then we had our Helmut, I'm very happy to send you the answers for the Jamboard if you want them afterwards, because that's a separate link that I could send to you if you want that, if you didn't capture it all. So then our helpmate, we had a shield. Why a shield for our helpmate in long-term relationships, do you think? A shield.
Because they're protecting their family?
Yes, that protect, to serve, they're protecting their family. It's a symbol on longevity,
Honor.
loyalty, honor. Thank you, Valerie. Honor, longevity, and looking back. And logistical talent doesn't relate so good, but logistical talent is right thing, right place, right time, right quantity repeatedly. And that long-term loyalty and commitment. Then our my mate is a brain, and I know someone said earlier that the brain more intelligent. What's our thoughts about why we picked a brain for our mind mate?
Intellectual, but I had cerebral. But I think that's too easy.
That's exactly right, Valerie. Intellectual and more cerebral. Exactly. And I mean, often, my mates often think they're more intelligent than others. It's just a different approach to being cerebral in their intelligence, different types of intelligences. And that precise language. I'm going to correct your word choice if your word choice isn't accurate, because words are my mate's tools and they want to make sure they're accurate in their understanding. So whereas other temperaments might think, why did you correct my language? It's actually a compliment because it shows the my mate is engaged in understanding. And as soon as the my mate's engaged in understanding, they're engaged. And they're big picture strategic talent. And then a soulmate, we chose this visual. Why this visual, do you think? What's your thoughts on this visual? Any soulmates here who would think, why would they identify with that visual? Ingrid, any thoughts? Or go on, Jerry, I see you come off mute.
Well, I'm not speaking as a soulmate myself, but that sense of self-improvement and having the perfection at the end of the road, and the perfection being realizable, self-actualization in there. So that, and also quite visual, metaphorical. So lots of pictures, lots of different pictures that all contribute to the same journey, that kind of thing.
Very nice. Visuals, metaphorical, sort of that winding path to that sort of perfection, and that perfection in terms of potential. Perfection for my mates is often more intellectual purity. So absolutely. And it's a journey. You know, life's a journey for our soulmates, and you never quite get there. And absolutely, questioning other people's language can annoy them. You're absolutely right, Catherine. Thank you for saying that. So global language and diplomatic talent, being able to build bridges between disparate viewpoints. So what I'd like to do now is what I call the real meaty activity. And I like alliteration, so it's called the connects and conflicts activity. What I'd like you to do is, for the 2 temperaments you've been allocated, I'd like you, if there is time and you can, to identify 3 possible connections those temperaments have. Now, I mean things in common, things that they share. So, for instance, I've already shared one thing about helpmate and soulmates, which is being more collaborative in nature. So, shared preferences or characteristics. Then I want you to think of 3 possible conflicts, ways that they might be different to each other. For instance, we've already talked about helpmate being much more practical, and soulmate being much more abstract. Because if we can focus on the connects, the things we have in common, the conflicts become complements, and that's what we're aiming for. because too often in relationships, we come in through the conflicts lens and they separate. If we can think, I'm going to look at what we have in common. Now, how are we different and how can we reframe that to be complements, not conflicts? So, what questions do you have on that activity? All right, so for this, and this is, we're going to try this because we're not sure how many people are actually live. We're going to put you in 6 different breakout rooms. Group 1, it says team 1 is going to be improviser, stabilizer. So you'll be looking at those 2 temperaments. And I'll have a look in the minute when Catherine's done the breakout rooms. Group
So, Susan,
2,
Susan, I have done them, so I can, if you want me to, I can tell people now which room they're in.
that'd be great. So improviser, stabilizer, that is?
So room 1, it's Daniel with Ingrid and Valerie.
Great. And then room 2 is improviser, theorist, or playmate, my mate.
Okay, so that's Sarita and Viv.
Okay. I'm getting worried as we go lower down here that those people aren't going to be able to join. Then we have playmate and soulmate, or improviser and catalyst.
And that would be Nathan and Susan.
Okay, and Susan, we've got a camera, so that's great news.
Ah,
And then we've got stabilizer and theorist, so that's helpmate and my mate.
right. Somebody, I don't know if somebody's just left, but Gina is now by herself in room 4. And she wasn't just now. There was somebody there just now. That's funny.
So could we move Valerie into that room and
Oh,
leave
yes.
Daniel
Yes,
and
we
Ingrid
could.
to have a chat as they're both in the same room?
That's a good idea. Yeah. So Valerie, I am moving you to room 4. So to be with Gina. Yeah, that's fine. Good idea.
Thank you, Catherine. And then group 5 is helpmate, soulmate. So that's stabilizer, catalyst.
And that is David Hodgson and Jerry.
David and Jerry. Perfect. So we know that one's going to
Sorry,
go
I
ahead.
will not be able to participate. So I was happy to be in a group of 3. That's
Okay.
Valerie talking. Sorry.
Yes, no, it's all right. We can see the yellow thing around your camera. Okay. Just let me think. Let's see how we're doing with 6 first. How are we? Who have we got? Which is my mate and soulmate. So that's theorist and catalyst.
And that leaves Emma and Tamsin.
Emma and Tamsin. So
Sorry, what were the 2 we were looking at there? Sorry, I didn't catch.
That's all right. Tamsin, theorist and catalyst, which
you.
is mind mate and soulmate.
Thank you.
So I think.
What was 4? Because we were playing around.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go back to that. Gina, I think we better put Gina in another group and we'll do helpmate and my mate together. So how about Gina, you go in with Nathan and Susan in group 3 as playmate and soulmate, or improviser and catalyst.
Okay.
I'm going to spend 10 minutes on this. It is on page 7 in your materials, and I will be asking you to report out. I'm not going to use a shared document for this. I want one person to report out your ideas, please. So just make sure you pick one person to report out. So.
Okay, so I'm ready to open the rooms when you're ready for me to. And Valerie, if you just ignore, you'll get an invitation to room 4, but just ignore it. And everyone else should get invitations to the right rooms, as we've discussed. Do you want me to open the rooms then, Susan?
Yes, please, Catherine. Thank you so much for your hosting.
So you should now have an invitation on your screen to go and join a room.
Yeah, it looks like we're. No, and it's often, sometimes it doesn't come up, so you might have to, because it's a different one, go to breakout rooms, and then the new invite will be there.
I think everybody's gone. Yeah.
I accept Daniel.
Actually, it says Daniel and Ingrid haven't joined their room.
Yeah, I wonder, but Daniel
They're
is
still here at the moment.
Oh, he maybe just switched off the camera.
Yeah, they have switched off their camera and their mic. And it doesn't actually matter, does it, as they're together? No, that's fine.
It doesn't.
No.
So I think that works.
Yeah.
Right. And did we pause recording again? Sorry.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Recording again. I think we've got. Now, I just want to check, are you still able to see in chat the focus on the connects and the conflicts become complements? Are you able to see that in chat? I just wanted to double check because Catherine had put that in chat. I can't remember if in chat you don't see it when you're in the breakout room. Okay, Catherine, do you want to repost it then? Because I think that's thank you for doing that, because I think that's a really important thing to do. So firstly, before we debrief, how was that activity? Tell me about that activity.
Yeah, we had a good chat. We didn't get onto the second half about conflict. We were very positive and stayed with all the possible connections.
I love it. Let's do the positives instead of what tends to happen, which is let's do all the things that are different. Very good. Thank you for that, Jerry. Any other comments about how was that activity?
Definitely thought-provoking.
Thought-provoking, yes. Yeah, and this is a really, I mean, if we can do this as individuals in our relationships, it's going to strengthen our relationships. It really is. So let me share my screen. And what I'm going to do in the interest of time is I'm going to ask for one idea from each group. So Daniel and Ingrid, what was one connect that you came up with and one conflict? And either put it in chat or say it for us. Go for it.
Yeah, we had the idea that the guardian is giving the playmate what the playmate wants. This should be pretty fine.
Yeah.
Working out pretty well, at least in the short term, and maybe there will be conflict in long term because then they discover that their goals do not align and they are quite a little, so the playmate will get bored.
Very, very nice. Thank you very much, Daniel and Ingrid. Yes, so they'll probably be aligned at first because, oh, well, we're concrete, we're tangible, we're getting things done. And yet long term, there's a risk that the improviser or the playmate might get bored. Thank you. And this is on page 10 in your materials, by the way, these connects and complements. So tangible outcomes, concrete language. So concrete language tends to talk more specifically and literally, and both tends to be hands-on. So they'll sort of share that practical bent. You highlighted one, that present versus past. You know, what did we do last time? Who cares as long as I'm having fun right now? Desire for freedom versus that respect for rules or guidelines. And that need to be of impact versus our helpmates' desire to be of service. So, and those conflicts, as I say, can become complements if we focus on the connects. And as statistically speaking, those are the most common relationships because of the percentages in the population. What about playmates and my mates? So that was Sarita and it was Viv. Just one connect and one conflict, and then I'll supplement with some additional ideas.
So it's really interesting. It was easy to find the conflict. So we started that conflict.
Often people do. Often people do.
And worked our way backwards. So one of the conflicts we talked about was the timeline conflict, in the now versus the infinite future. And then they reverse that. And so actually, in a way that might bring a connect, because the joy of being in the now for the
mind mate,
yeah, it's trying to translate the mind mate, joy of being in the now for a short amount of time would bring some fun and relief, and that situational context, being light in the moment, actually would be fun for a while. So that's the approach we took. We sort of found the conflict and then reversed it.
Fantastic. And that's a lot of it. It's about here's the conflict and here's how we can use it as a complement. So as some ideas about similarities, they both value competence, actually. They respect it, they understand it. So for our playmates, it's tactical competence. Are you able to do what you say you're going to do? And you'll often find the playmate will test you out. Don't ask me to do something that you're not willing to do yourself. And then for our my mates or theorists, it's much more abstract. How intellectually interesting are you? So they really connect there. I talked earlier, they both tend to be pragmatic, which is different from practical. That's expediency, doing what is necessary at the time. And they enjoy problem solving. They'll often connect the mind mates in that theoretical, here's how we could solve the problem from an abstract perspective, and the improviser was, hey, this will probably work. Conflicts, present versus infinite, you picked that one up. Hands-on versus models or theories. And Playmates are always focused on motivation. What's in it for the other person, and how can I get what I want, and how can the other person get what they want? Versus the mind mate is more interested in how does this categorize? How can I intellectually structure this? It's not sequential structure, it's categorization. And I know there's probably questions on some of these. So if there's questions afterwards, drop me an email and I'm always happy to clarify. All right, we had group 3 then, which was Playmate and Soulmate. So we had Nathan, Susan, and Gina. Give me one there. Thank you, Nathan. Good to see you. One on one.
Yeah, good to see you all. And this was a great activity. I think I enjoyed being able to see the relationship from both sides, and that's what this thing got us to do. So that was great. And so for a connect, we were thinking like the Playmate and Soulmate can engage in fun activities, but that are also meaningful. And this will help the soulmates to be grounded in the present moment and help the playmate see the significance of the moment. And so that's fun.
Lovely words, Nathan. Yes, that's sort of a fun in the moment. Really lovely words, meaningful, and then implications of the activities for the playmate. Very nice.
In terms of a conflict, sometimes the playmate might want to move too quickly, either in terms of a practical matter or in terms of the relationship perhaps, and versus the soulmate might want to just feel it out first, feel out the decision, and be a little bit more considering all the angles of the decision before they move forward. And that can cause some conflict, especially if the soulmate feels like the playmate is reneging on an emotional agreement that they've made, and they might feel like they're being manipulated just through being like pushed into movement. And the soulmate might try to just please the playmate in the heat of the moment, but like without attending to their own needs sometimes, or this playmate might not recognize its soulmate's needs at that moment. So that could
because we have a lovely viewpoint here, actually. And I would just question the improviser, the playmate's going to act in the moment, probably. The soulmate may want more time to think around it. That tends to be more what we call the behind the scenes soulmate, because they want to gather all the data to get the best possible decision. An in-charge soulmate might just want to make the decision on a relationship. So there might be that could be slightly different through the interaction style lens. But yes, so they both read. Thank you for that, Nathan. Thank you for all that input. They read people well and fun. They do share a sense of fun. They do, and enjoy creative expression. One's hands-on, one's more abstract. That present versus future, that make an impact versus make a difference. If the playmate is making an impact, it might not make a difference, and it might actually do the opposite. And that freedom versus long-term relationships could be a conflict, but that does also depend on, for our playmates, whether they use introverted feeling or introverted thinking. Introverted feeling, that might not be quite as common. So that's ISFPs or ESFPs. There was no one in a group 4 for helpmate, my mate. So I'll simply share this one. So both like a sense of structure. They both like to improve systems. And they both like to raise efficiency. So they share that in common. Past versus infinite could be a conflict, because we did this last time. Who cares? Let's look at this problem differently. Single loop, let's improve, problem solve within the system versus let's chuck out the system and start again. And tradition versus innovation. You can see how it could become complements. So let's look at tradition and combine it with innovation. You actually get a fabulous outcome. All right, one thing for helpmate and soulmate then for David and Jerry. Again, if you, I'm sensitive to time. If you could and be as succinct as possible, pushing you there. Sorry about that, particularly with the get things going, David. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I'm happy to answer for this one.
Right, there we go.
Yeah, this fits my relationship as a soulmate with a helpmate. One thing that works well and connects is the actual difference in how we perceive the world. So it's the focus on the present, what works now from the helpmate, as opposed to the let's look to the future, the big picture, what might be different. And that difference of opinion and way of viewing things can be very useful if you meet at the end of an evening and you discuss the evening you've had and you come at it from completely different perspectives. I find that really stimulating and a good source of connection. One conflict might be the attitude to risk, the helpmate being seen as boring and just do what works because it's always worked. And that can be a conflict with the soulmate who maybe wants to try different ways of doing things, even though there might not be any justification for it other than just let's try a different approach to see what happens.
Thank you. So you actually took, the first one was a compliment. So that's how you can complement each other with sort of the present or past orientation with future. The second one was definitely risk averse versus more risk taking. Risk tolerant, I think, would be a good word for our soulmate. That's not on the list, so you want to keep that. So connects, they're both harmony, the collaboration, and they like to maintain long-term relationships. There's a real commonality there. Past versus future, so they can be chalk and cheese. Concrete, much more language talking about specific examples versus ideas. And reality, as helpmates are so reality based, they know what's real versus the possibilities based for our soulmate. And last but not least, we've got Emma and Tamsin. You had my mate and soulmate. Can you share one for us?
Yes. So we had, in terms of connections, we were thinking about them sort of both wanting to make sort of a long-term difference and an impact. One obviously more leaving a legacy, the other one more on other people.
Great.
And in terms
Lovely.
of conflicts, I think we had a few, but one of them was sort of potentially the mind-mate meet sort of wanting to be more autonomous, whereas the soulmate feeling that they needed to make a connection more, so that could cause potential conflicts.
Very nice. Yes. So the two sharing that sort of big picture, concepts, ideas, autonomy versus more closer in relationships. Very nice. And they're different from the ones I've got. So do both focus on the big picture, tend to have future focus because an infinite time orientation is past, present, and future. And yeah, the system, you're right, system versus people in the system. Differential, so I'm going to look at the differences, whereas our soulmates look at the differences and integrate them. So that's what we mean by differential versus integrative thinking. And precise, really accurate language versus more global language with Kissy called it the delightful art of over-exaggeration, but that's not what most people call it. So when love beckons to you, follow him, although his ways are hard and steep. Relationships are tough and they require constant hard work. And Catherine, I mean, my husband and I have been together 50 years. It still doesn't make the relationship easy. There are still ripples. I think, gosh, there we go again with our type, temperament, or interaction style differences. So I'd love you to share what's been an insight you've got for the session and just put that in chat for me, please. What insights have you got from the session? And by the way, this is True Colors, Cyndi Lauper, which is a Temperament song. I know, Jerry, you've got to drop off, so I think he's gone. Just to let you know, that's all my information about me, which isn't in the handout. And there's two websites, one for my facilitation content and one for my personality type content, but the most reliable email address is susan.nash@empower.com. So Valerie, thank you. You like the connects and conflicts. It's all about appreciation and hard work. Tamsin, thank you for that. Thank you, Dave. It's always a pleasure seeing you. Thank you. I think Jerry's gone. Any other? And there is Dating Rating. It is on Amazon and it's available as a Kindle or ebook as well as a hard copy book. The only reason I don't have it on the behind me is because we can't find one in the house at the moment, which is really poor of us, actually.
You'll have to order yourself one from Amazon, Susan.
That's what I've got to do. That's exactly what I've got to do. So thank you, and a huge thank you to Catherine for all the hosting, because it's so much work behind the scenes, which enables me to just focus. And thank you for your input. And as far as I'm concerned, you can go and get dinner. I'm going to go and have lunch because it's only lunchtime here in San Diego.
Okay, well, I want to thank you, Susan, on behalf of everybody here. I mean, it's been a fantastic session. I especially like that compliments thing, you know, how you turn your connects and your conflicts into compliments. I think that's a wonderful concept. So that's one that I'm going to be adding to my relationship, hopefully. But yeah, thank you ever so much. I will email out the recording in a day or two when I've got a bit of time. And Susan, you've got all her contact details there if you want to get back in touch with her, and do have a look at the book because it has got some really valuable stuff in it. I'll stop the recording now and